The wind tore across the open plains like a blade, sharp and merciless, driving needles of snow into everything it touched. The cowboy urged his tired horse forward, his coat stiff with ice, his thoughts fixed on the small cabin ahead, the only shelter for miles. Night had swallowed the land whole, and even the stars had hidden from the cold. As he dismounted and reached for the door, a sound stopped him. It was not the wind this time, but a faint knock, weak and uneven, as if whoever made it had already spent their last strength. His hand went instinctively to his rifle. Out here, hesitation could mean death. He opened the door just a crack, and the storm rushed in, carrying with it the shape of a woman. She stood swaying on her feet, wrapped in a torn shawl that did nothing to stop the cold. Her face was pale, lips trembling, dark hair crusted with snow. Her eyes, wide with fear and desperation, met his. "I'm freezing," she whispered, her voice breaking. "Can I get in, please? I beg you." For a long second, the cowboy said nothing. He had seen trickery before, heard lies dressed in tears. But this was no act. This was survival clawing at its last chance. He stepped aside and pulled the door open. The woman stumbled forward, her knees giving out the moment she crossed the threshold. He caught her before she hit the floor, surprised by how light she was, like someone already half gone. He laid her near the fire and threw on more wood until the flames roared. The cabin filled with warmth, but she shivered uncontrollably, her body slow to believe it was safe. He wrapped her in thick blankets and pressed a warm tin cup into her hands. Slowly, painfully, she drank. Color crept back into her face, though fear still clung to her eyes. She spoke in broken breaths, telling him she was Apache, that she had escaped men who planned to sell her like property. Her wrists bore raw marks where ropes had bitten into her skin. She had walked through the snow for 2 days, guided only by instinct and the hope of smoke rising from somewhere, anywhere. The cowboy listened in silence, jaw tight. He had known cruelty, but seeing it written so clearly on another human being stirred something deep and angry inside him. When she finished, she waited, tense, ready for rejection. Instead, he stood, placed another blanket over her shoulders, and said quietly that no one would touch her here. That night, while the storm screamed outside, he took the floor near the fire and let her sleep in the bed. As the flames flickered, he wondered how a single knock on a door could change 2 lives forever. Morning arrived slowly, creeping into the cabin through frost-lined windows, turning the cold glass pale with light. The storm had eased, but the world outside remained silent and white, as if the land itself were holding its breath. The Apache woman woke with a sharp intake of air, her body tensing as memory rushed back. For a moment she did not know where she was. Then she felt the warmth of the blankets, smelled the faint smoke of the fire, and realized she was still alive. She sat up quickly, eyes scanning the room. The cowboy stood near the small table, slicing dried meat and setting it onto a plate. He noticed her movement but did not rush toward her. Instead, he placed the plate down and stepped back, giving her space. The simple gesture eased something tight in her chest. He was careful, she realized, not just with his hands, but with her fear. He poured hot water into a cup and set it beside the food. She approached slowly, like someone testing thin ice, then sat. Hunger overcame caution. She ate in silence, each bite bringing strength back into her limbs. When she finally looked up, she met his eyes and nodded once in thanks. She told him her name and spoke of her people, her voice steadier now. She had been taken while traveling with a small group, ambushed by men who saw only profit where there should have been respect. She had escaped at night, cutting her bonds on a jagged stone, running until her legs gave out, then crawling until the cold nearly claimed her. The cabin's light, she said, had felt like a miracle. The cowboy listened without interrupting. He had lived alone long enough to understand silence. When she finished, he told her she could stay until she regained her strength. No conditions, no demands, just time. The days that followed were quiet but meaningful. He showed her where the firewood was kept and how to stack it so it would stay dry. She mended a tear in his coat with careful hands, her movements practiced and precise. At night, they sat near the fire, its glow dancing across the walls, and she sang softly in her language, songs of rivers, of endurance, of spirits that watched over the lost. Trust did not arrive all at once. It grew in small moments, the way she no longer startled when he stood, the way he asked before moving closer. One evening, she finally asked why he had helped her. He stared into the flames for a long time before answering that some lines should never be crossed. No matter how harsh the world became, she held on to those words as she lay down that night, realizing that for the first time since her escape, she was no longer afraid to sleep. When the weather finally began to soften, the silence inside the cabin changed. The woman noticed it first, the way the cowboy checked the horizon more often, the way his movements grew restless. Snow still clung to the ground in patches, but the worst of the cold had passed, and with it came the truth neither of them had spoken aloud. She could not stay hidden forever. One morning, as pale sunlight spilled across the floor, she folded her blanket carefully and set it aside. Her hands trembled, though her voice did not. She told him she would leave before men came searching. She'd already brought him risks simply by surviving. The thought of danger reaching his door weighed heavily on her. Freedom, she believed, meant walking away before she caused harm to someone who had shown her kindness. The cowboy listened, leaning against the table, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he shook his head slowly. He said she would not travel alone again, not through land that punished the weak and hunted the vulnerable. If she wished to go south, he would ride with her. If she wished to reach a settlement, he would see her there safely. The decision, he said, would be hers. His words unsettled her more than fear ever had. Choice was something that had been stolen from her long before she escaped. Now it was being handed back freely without expectation. She turned away to hide the tears that rose uninvited. They left the cabin at dawn 2 days later. The land stretched endlessly before them, harsh and beautiful in equal measure. They rode during the day and camped at night, sharing quiet meals and guarded conversations. On the third night, shadows moved beyond the firelight. Bandits circled, testing their resolve. The cowboy stood firm, his presence calm but unyielding. When the threat passed, she realized her hands were still shaking, but not from fear, from relief that she was not facing the world alone. As miles passed beneath their feet, she saw the man he was when no one was watching, patient with the horse, careful with supplies, respectful of her silence. In return, she shared stories of her childhood, of laughter beside rivers and lessons learned from elders. Each story stitched another thread between them. One night, beneath a sky heavy with stars, she admitted she no longer felt like she was running. The cowboy smiled faintly and said, "Sometimes survival turned into something stronger when shared." Neither spoke of what lay ahead, but in the quiet between them, something steady and unspoken had already taken root. The settlement appeared on the horizon just before sunset, its low buildings dark against the glowing sky. Smoke rose from chimneys, and the distant sound of life carried on the wind, voices, animals, movement. It should have felt like an ending. Instead, the Apache woman felt an unexpected heaviness settle in her chest. She slowed her steps, her gaze drifting back toward the open plains behind them, toward the long road that had brought her here. They stopped at the edge of a shallow hill. The cowboy waited, saying nothing, sensing the storm inside her. She stood there for a long moment, fingers tightening around the strap of her worn bundle. This place was safe. It offered walls, people, protection. But safety, she realized, was not the same as belonging. She turned to him then, her eyes steady, her voice calm but certain. She told him that freedom had once meant escape, running until her lungs burned, surviving another night. But now freedom felt different. It felt like choosing where to stand without fear, choosing who to trust without force. She did not want to disappear into a crowd where her past would still follow her like a shadow. The cowboy listened, his face softening as understanding dawned. She gestured back toward the plains, toward the cabin that had sheltered her when the world nearly froze her away. She said she wanted to return, not as someone hiding, not as someone rescued, but as someone who chose her own path. She waited for his answer, prepared for disappointment, but unwilling to lie to herself any longer. He exhaled slowly, then smiled, not the guarded smile of a man used to solitude, but one full of quiet respect. He told her that if she returned, It would be because she wished to, not because she owed him anything. She would walk beside him, not behind him. The words settled between them like a promise. They turned away from the settlement together. The journey back felt lighter, as though the land itself approved. When the cabin finally came into view, it no longer looked like a refuge from death, but the beginning of something living. Seasons passed. Snow returned, then gave way to green. The woman learned the rhythms of the land, and the cowboy learned the strength of shared days. She was no longer the desperate figure knocking on a door in the dark. She was a woman who had faced the cold, survived cruelty, and chosen her future with open eyes. And in that small cabin on the wide plains, freedom was no longer something she ran toward. It was something she lived every single day.